Okay, so this is of course Blender, and I'm gonna modify this cube somewhat. Remember to go into edit mode. You press your tab, and once you're in edit mode, you can also change it down here. Go from object mode to edit mode. Once you're in edit mode, we're going to change this somewhat. Now, I won't spend a huge amount of time on making this look great or anything, but I'm gonna choose the edge select. This the cube down here with the orange edge. And now I can right click and it selects this entire line here. I'm going to do an E for extrude. Take it up like that. And I'm going to grab this edge down here. I'll right click on it, hold down my shift key and right click on this one so they're both selected. So I got this one selected and this one selected. And now if I do an F, it creates a face. It creates edges, creates faces based upon what you have selected. If you have two vertices selected, then it just creates the edge between them. Now, if I wanted this to see enclosed in, if I right-click this edge, hold on my Shift key, right-click this one, and right-click this one, you see that it encloses a certain area. Now, if I do F, then it'll close that in. Remember, I said I wasn't going to spend a huge amount of time on that. I might try to actually make this a little bit straighter there. There. Okay, so I'm going to right click this edge, hold on my shift key, that one, and then I'll do F to close that like that. Okay, so now if I go back to my, let's see, if I select a face right here, I have this face selected. And if I do a W and then choose subdivide, it'll subdivide just that face. You see these other ones aren't subdivided. If I do W again and choose subdivide, it'll divide it some more. If I do W again, subdivide, do it some more. Now, if I want to cut out where a door might be, for example, well, if I do A twice, well, A once, I guess in this case, it unselects it, which is what I wanted. Now, I want to select these faces where maybe a door might be. So I could do C for circle select. And if I click and hold down my left mouse button, I can move my mouse around, and it'll select everything that circle touches. You can also use your mouse wheel to make the circle bigger or smaller. Now, once you got everything selected that you want, you do your right arrow key to unselect. And now I can do an X. See, this is where I always kind of draw a blank, whether I need to delete vertices, edges, or faces. And I think, let's try faces. Yeah, that worked. If I chose vertices, it probably would have got rid of these vertices over here, and that would have messed up these other parts. But that puts our door in there. Okay, so now if I save this, and see, I'm on desktop, so I'll call this house 1. And I'll put .blend on there. I think it puts it there by default, but if I click Save Blender File, then it's got it saved. Now, I could have, if I wanted to, had merged these into a single face, but that's not too many vertices to take in. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project. And imported Blender objects. Call it that. And I'll click Create Project. There we go. Yeah, I feel like a sneeze coming on. Excuse me. Okay.
Good night.
Thanks. Now down here in the assets, I'm going to import in that Blender file. Very simple. You just right click on here and you see there's an import new asset. And I'm going to choose my desktop. So that's where I saved it at. And I'll choose my house one. You notice my orientation here. So I got this here. Now I'm going to left mouse click and drag and drop that up here. That's curious. Sideways here, but appears okay there. And then I see the object that I created. I guess I can't see through it on that. Almost looks like. There's our door. But that's how you bring a game object into Unity. And just like everything else, you can move that around, so forth. Now, let's see if I can remember my sign on to TurboSquid. TurboSquid. Email address. Okay, so for a house. I don't know why I'm looking at that. I go to free. And you see that there's a lot of different possibilities that you can bring in. We haven't talked much about the textures yet, so I was looking for something real basic. We're going to talk a little bit about textures today and images and so forth. Here's not a bad one. So let me choose that one. FBX should definitely be Be okay. I'll download. Housefbx.zip. Okay, so I'm going to show in folder. Cut that. And I guess just go ahead and throw in pictures. Right click on it and say extract all. And extract. Creates a house.fbx. I think there's a dot there. Oh, there. House.fbx. Come over here, I right click in assets, and I choose import new asset. And I go to my pictures. House FBX, House FBX, House.fbx. And now you see we have another house on there that's maybe a little bit better than the one I designed. There's the back of it. Now, see, this is of course, if we were selling it, I'm sure there's restrictions on it, but this is a free model we could use in our games. So you can populate quite a few of these with existing models where you don't have to sit there and spend a huge amount of time doing it. Is there any questions on how to import model in? Now that's going to be one of the projects I'll assign. Is I want you to create a little mini town. You know, it doesn't have to be a town of 10,000 houses. So you take the 2 years to drop on 10,000 models. You know, you can have 8 houses. You know, and drop on a couple other models and see what happens. Just play with it. At least create 2 yourself. You know, just to get used to Blender and bring them in. Now, if I save the project, scene is different, but you see there's a save scene also. If I do a file, save scene as, this is where you can get the location. So that'll help you figure out where perhaps you saved your project. Also, let me say new project. Also right here will tell you the location of it. So see, it says C users, Kali instructor documents for mine. So you want to note that down. I'm assuming that's where this one is stored at. Yep, documents. So imported Blender objects is right here. Let me close this all out. And go to my documents. And imported Blender objects is right here. Now I'm at the main folder, and this is where you want to be. To turn this in, the Blackboard, you right click on it, and you choose send to compressed zip folder. And that'll zip up a lot of files. And press enter. And see, just a very basic we came up with is a pretty good size file. You do not want to try to go in and upload any individual files. If I double click this, you're going to see there's 4 folders under Assets. You'll see my blend file. You'll see also FBX and so forth. Under Scenes, you see more information. Library, bunches of files. Same with these other areas. You'll find files under them, depending upon what you've set. Now, one thing I will note here is you notice that we got the Assets folder here, and under the Assets is actually a blend file at FBX. If over here, I'm going to close that. This is not where I saved my blend file at. When I imported it in, it made a copy over here. So if you change your original, it will not be reflected here. But if you change the blend file underneath the Assets folder, if I double click this, I got this Blender file open. Let me go into Unity. And I'll do an open on that one, imported Blender objects. So I got my basic house here. If I come over to here, and I'm still in edit mode, appears like, so I'm going to make sure I'm in Edge Select. Let's try here. Maybe I'll do Face Select. Choose Face Select. Right click this one, do E for Extrude. Right click this one, do E for Extrude. Want to choose the Edge Select. Have that selected. Have this one selected. Do an F. It creates a face between them. This one, hold down my Shift key. This one. I'm what am I doing? Right clicking them. Do an F. Creates a face. Come here. F for face. Okay, so I made quite a few changes to that. Maybe not necessarily improvements, but I made changes. Let me go ahead and save that. Now over here, if you pause for a little bit, you see your changes are reflected. So what I just did, I can now see. That makes sense on if you want to change an existing asset, where you need to change it at?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I haven't actually tried that technique with images. I've tried with blend files, but it should work the same there. If you've dropped on an image here, if you change the image in the location in that folder of that project, it should be reflected automatically. Now, occasionally I've had it where it doesn't somehow sense that there's a change, and at that point you come down here wherever your object is. Like this one, you can right click on it and there's a refresh. Worst case, re-import. So that brings it back in. Now this is strange as can be. I didn't expect all these items underneath when I expand this. It was just a regular cube that I was working with. And it makes sense it comes up with its own material block, but you can see that if you expand these, you can see a lot of different things comes in. Like this is bringing the windows in. Just curious. Okay. You have to select them up here. That's right. Assets. Assets has nothing to do with what's on your scene. Over here, the house I brought in, I was wondering how you could select part of this. You see this, you can expand. And if you click these individual ones, then it picks different pieces. And see how those pieces can be taken apart like that. When you're creating a model in Blender, they don't have to be connected. So this one right here, I do an E for extrude, like that, and then I choose the vertex, select, and I select this one, and I select this one, and I'm going to do an X for delete, and choose vertices. You see right here, we still have this edge. It'll bring that in. So the fact that it looks like this window isn't connected to the rest of the house, that's not an issue in terms of the game development, or even modeling in general. It is something you have to pay attention to if you're going to be doing any kind of coding on the individual elements in here. Okay. Again, I want you to go through and create a little mini town. So let me do a new project. And I'll say terrain example. It's a 3D still, so create project. Now I'm just giving you an overview now of the terrain. There's a lot you can do with terrain. We'll look at that as the semester goes on. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to add an object on here, do a game object, and I'll say 3D object, and I'll say cube. Okay, so we got our cube here. And I guess I didn't notice this on Tuesday, but it isn't putting it down here in the assets. That's interesting. The idea of having it in the assets here is you could sit there and drag different instances of it, but I guess once you put it a primitive object up here, then that's all it is. Okay, now if I run this, looks weird because it's just like floating out in space. Now, if I come up here and do a game object, 3D object, and you see there's one called terrain. It drops terrain on there like a ground. Now the terrain itself can be moved, so you can grab these and move them. Although I'm not sure why you'd want to do it. You could, I think, probably rotate it also. If I did the right way. Let's see, red maybe? No. Maybe that doesn't have any effect on terrain. Let's try scale. That didn't appear to have any effect either. I guess move is all you can do. I was curious. There's a reason why those don't take effect. I never have tried it. Now notice my cube is down below here. So I want to move it up so it's not down below the floor. And if I run this now, can't hardly see that, but scale that, make it bigger if I could see it. What I did is I grabbed the middle there, and that changes it in all directions. Okay, now let me run it. Okay, yeah, I can see that better. Still doesn't look very great. It looks like it's on snow, but now over here, you can choose the terrain, and you can do the same thing over here. You can click on it, left mouse click to select it. And this may or may not be expanded, these, but you got a terrain collider. If I expand the terrain, then you see that there's different options here. And we're going to look at all these over time, but one of them is raise, lower the terrain. And if I come here and click, you see how it raised the terrain right there. Now that's because I have this last one selected. Now let me do a Control Z to undo that. If I choose one of these other ones, like this first one, and click here, and click here, then you see how the terrain's raised. Now a lot of that's controlled with the brush size, opacity. Some of these other ones allow you to change it in different forms, so forth. Paint texture, paint details, so forth. Now here's a terrain collider. We got terrain data, material. And when you click these little circles here to the side, it brings up a screen over here where you can select different items. Like over here, I could select the material to use if there was any there. Here, I could come over here and select new for new terrain data. Okay, so for the terrain here, you see there's paint height, smooth height, paint texture, paint trees, paint details, and then just in general, this the little round cog, I think that's a cog, is always your settings. This is where you can get a lot of the detail. Reflections, pixel error, base map distribution, Terrain width, terrain length. Remember, I was trying to use the scale, but you can come here and do it, looks like, and so forth. And then when I come here, I see I now have a terrain to work with. Let's see, go to terrain data, and trying to find out where the where we can set the material at. Probably looking right at it. There, oh, there it is. It's under the paint texture, and there's edit textures here. And you can click add texture. Like if I click add texture here, it puts a new texture over here. If I come down here to assets and I right click and I choose import new asset, now I go to my pictures and download grass, or bring grass in. Now, if I click the grass here, I should be able to drag and drop it up here. And then click add. And that changes it to a grassy hill terrain. I have to remember where that's at. You do have to have terrain selected, so you can select it here. It gets harder when you have your tools selected here to actually maybe choose different ones. And that was here under texture, paint texture. So now if I run it, doesn't look like I'm in some big snow background, but you actually see your grassy hill. Is there any questions on applying a texture to your grass?
Are there any limits to
like colors or anything?
No, because you just bring in a JPEG here. Like if I click edit texture, come down here and right click, and I'll choose import and bring in the Pink Panther. I should be able to drag and drop the Pink Panther here, and then my texture changes. What I haven't played with yet in Unity, and I'm real curious, is how you can invert the images. And like I'm guessing, if I drop that there, doesn't change. What I mean by invert the images is have the image appear like on the other side. Like if I have this cube here, and I apply the material to it, and there's an easy way to apply it to this, but how can you have it on the inside of the cube? That's the part I haven't played with yet, so I'd just be guessing on where it's located at. Okay, now let's apply something to this cube. I guess I could apply the grass. If you have the cube selected, it's pretty easy. You take your material, your image, you have to have your cube selected. You take your image here, you don't want to click it, you want to click and hold down, and don't let up, and drag and drop this down here at the bottom. And it applies that texture to your shape. If I had game object, 3D object, sphere. Let me change the size of it. Bring it up a little bit. If I have a import, new asset, then I'll bring in another image. And then again, I have to have the sphere selected here. And you click and drag this and drop it down at the bottom. Then applies it to that. I'm not on rotate. Where's rotate? You see that maybe it doesn't give you quite where you want it to be at in terms of your image. That's where in Blender you can apply whatever image to your 3D model and have more control. Okay, so again, that's how you do your terrain. Lots of different options here under the terrain. This just raises part of your terrain. These raise like in kind of random order, and you can have mixes of those. Let's come here and click where you want to raise it. What is that one? Try this one. I don't see it applying. Unless my eyes
That might be because you're painting.
That might be because you're painting.
Oh, shoot, it is up here, isn't it? Okay. Ah, there it goes. Now let's try it. There it goes. Oops, too much. So you can see you can get not just like raise one hill, but you can kind of make it look like a mountain type. Along with that, this brush size and opacity, you can have a lot more control when you bring it up, what it'll look like. You see my brush size there, I made it bigger, and it's this entire area now. Okay, so I guess that's probably enough about the introduction to the terrain. You can see that's going to be a big part of your some of your games, though. If you want to create a terrain effect, you can very easily throw mountains up like that. You know, does that look more realistic than just a JPEG thrown in the background? Yeah, it does. Okay, so I'm going to do a new project. And I'll movement, probably have movement, let's say 2. And create project, and I'll save the scene. Okay, I'm going to drop a terrain on there. So do a game object, 3D object, terrain. And see, I got the move, the tool selected to translate. So move that. Maybe I'll right click on this and choose import new asset, and I'll pick grass again. Now I want my terrain selected here. Let's see if I can remember where it was at. I think it was under the paint texture. And edit textures. And click add texture. Drag my grass, drop it right here. Click add. Okay, so now I'm gonna run my game. And we got grass there. Okay, now I want to add a cube. So do game object, and I'll choose 3D object and cube. I'm going to move it up, so I choose my move tool. And let me change the scale. So click my scale and grab the gray cube in the middle, just so we can see it a little bit easier. Move it up some more. Of course, the key is how it looks. Okay, that's not bad. Maybe a little big. Let me change the scale some more. Move back down. There we go. Okay, now I got the cube selected. And if you didn't have it selected, you come over here and click cube. I'll click add component here. And I want to choose new script. And I'll call this cube movement. Press enter. Creates my C# code here. Now this C# code, I need to double click so I can go into Visual Studio. If you click it one time, you see it just brings up what the current code is. So I'm going to double click the cube movement. This is I'm not sure if we saw it in this class, but using is where you're bringing in code that somebody else has already written. So all this is bringing in a bunch of additional code, so you don't have to recode everything from scratch. Down here, we got public, means you can access it from outside of this scene. And we got something called a class, and then we call it cube movement. And then use this for initialization. And then update is called once per frame. So every time your game runs, it's going through frames, like a game cycle you can think of. And each time through that game cycle, that frame, it'll run this code right here. Now, void means nothing's returned. And so it does this update, it just runs this code. Whenever you have a beginning curly brace, you'll have a closing curly brace. This kind of groups together lines of code. Now I want to save off the position. Like if I come over here, if I click the cube, there's a transform here that keeps track of the XY, XYZ, and so that's what I'm going to manipulate. Now I need to save off the old position, so I'm going to declare vector 3, and I'll call it position. And I have, what do I have? Position dot XYZ. You see down here is XYZ. A vector is like a list of numbers. You can think of it that way. So vector is like a list of numbers. In this case, the vector is keeping track of location. Now what this is where are you located at in the game. And so this is one of the methods. There's other items to keep track of besides just your X, Y, and Z position. But this is one of the methods of changing where your character is. Okay, so I've declared a vector 3. This is just telling what data structure I'm using. And then I've called it position. You can call it whatever you want. And then we got a semicolon. A little green squiggly means that I've declared it, but I haven't done anything with it. Now I'm going to say position is equal to this dot transform dot position. Okay, so this is what I've declared to temporarily keep track of the position. When I say this, that's referring to the cube, because I attached to the cube, I attached the script file somewhere. Probably looking right at it. There it is. See the cube movement script? So this C# code right here is specifically attached to this. So when I say this over in my program, I'm referring to the cube. So this dot transform. So when I say transform, I'm referring to the transform right here. And so it's going to take all this information and save it off. And then when I say dot position, that is specifically referring to just the position right here, this X, Y, and Z across the top. It's not referring to rotation. It's not referring to scale. Okay. Now, if I just did position.x is equal to position.x plus 0.05f. Now the x here, let's see if it'll tell me. It tells me it's a float. That's a number with decimals. And you wouldn't want to go by ones necessarily because your character goes so fast off the screen. So you want to increase the distance. So this is going to take the x position of where my character is stored at, and each time through the game cycle, it'll add on a 0.05 in terms of distance. Now the f you see on here, you have to have to indicate as a floating point value. A strongly typed programming language cannot mix something that's a float and something that would be considered like a number called a double, which we haven't talked about yet. Okay, now once I've changed the position, then I want to write it back out. So I say this dot transform dot position is equal to position. So this is going out here to my cube, and it's grabbing the current position. I'm changing just the x part of the current position right here, and then I'm writing it back out to the cube. So I'm taking that and writing it back out to the cube. Now, how we attach this to Unity is you click this Attach to Unity button. What this will do is it'll go through and compile to make sure you don't have any errors. And it'll attach a code. What does that mean to attach code? It means send a code to it. This will eventually get done. Now, if I come over to Unity, if I click my code here one time, I now see that this code has been transferred over. And if I run this, let's see what it does. It's going off my screen. Because my X is being increased by 0.05. Now over here, it's still attached, so I have to click this little square here to stop debugging. You can actually click that anytime after it's officially been sent over to Unity. You don't have to have this up and running even. Okay, now what we really want to do is we want to control the movements with some keys. So the vector 3 there is fine. Saving off the cube position is fine. But here, I'm going to do an if statement, and I'll say if input dot, never can remember which one this is. Any key, get key. The one I want to choose is one that always says think auto fire. So get key is the one I want. Do a beginning parentheses. Now I type key code dot, and then this will pop up with all the keys I can program. So if I start typing right arrow, and once I get that, I can do a tab for code completion. And I get this. What this is doing is it's seeing that if I'm this input.get key is always that. It's always input.get key, never changes. The key code never changes. The only thing that ever changes here is the dot and then whatever your key is you're trying to program. So this is checking to see if I'm pressed my right arrow key. If I did, maybe I want to change the X position and increase it by 0.05. If I do another one, get key, key code dot left arrow. Then I want to take my X position and I want to subtract 0.5, 0.05 F, like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this because I don't want it to move it automatically. Now it will just move when I push my keystrokes. So I'm going to go ahead and attach to Unity. Let it go off and do its thing. And okay, so now again, if you're wondering if it's actually there, you can click here and you can see if your changes are here. If I run this, if I do my right arrow key, goes to right. If I hold down, it just keeps on moving. If I press my left arrow key, it goes like that. Goes over that way. So this is how, and we're going to see how you integrate this with the camera in coming classes. But this is how you get your character to move. Now notice when you look at the little XYZ here, Y is up and down. I'm not used to that. I know there's different coordinate systems. But over here, up and down is Z in Blender. And that's actually what it is. I've taught Calc 3 before, and that's what it is in Calculus also. So it threw me. I programmed this earlier just to make sure I remembered the syntax. And I was thinking Y would move along the terrain. And it didn't. It's just moving it up and down. So what I need to program is Z. So let's go back to our code. I'm going to stop that. There we go. And I'm going to do a check here. I'm going to say if input dot get key, and I just did a tab once it came down and found the correct one. Key code dot up arrow, and I'm going to say position dot z equals position dot z plus 0.05f. And I'll put if input dot get key code dot down arrow, then position dot z is equal to position dot z minus 0.05f. Now the if is checking to see if a condition is true or not. And this will return true or false. That's what's called a Boolean condition. This checks to see if the right arrow is being pressed down. If it does, it returns true. And if it's true, it'll do this line of code right here. Same with the rest of these. Okay, so if I click Attach to Unity, and if there was a way to see it, I'm not seeing it, but I wish there was a way the way it told you it was done compiling and everything, but I'm not seeing any kind of status anywhere. Now, if I run this now, use my left and right arrow key, so it goes like that. If I press my down arrow, see it's coming like that. Press my up arrow, it's going off that way. How it's controlled speed-wise is by, let me stop that, is by this 0.05f. So that's what controls how fast it goes. Instead of hard coding it there, you could come up here and see if I can declare it in the right place. Public class cube movement. I come up here and I say float speed equals 0.05. I'll put an F. So now instead of down here, I just put speed instead of hard coding the value. So I put it in one place. So now if I want to change that speed, I just change that one place. And it automatically is updated down here. This is called a variable. In some cases, you might refer to this as a constant because it doesn't change values. But this is like how we keep track of a value that we want to use in our program. And if I click Attach to Unity, again, if I was designing this, I'd have a nice little green message popped up, say, hey, I'm done compiling. Pretty much I always consider if I try to tab over to the Unity and won't go, it's still transferring. Okay, so if I run this now, oops, press my arrow keys, get our cube to move. What was that? That was our cube right here, and that's our script for that. Now you can have other items moving on your object. You can change other items besides your position. Let me drop another object on here. So I'll do create 3D object, and I'll drop on 3D. Drop on a sphere. Okay, so I don't always get this right. Okay, I'm going to have it move along my x-axis. So here's our camera over here. So it'll go there. So this is going to move automatically. Now this code right here is specific for my cube. So if I want code for my sphere, I'm going to come over here. I'll click Add Component. And I'll choose New Script. And call it whatever. I'll call it Sphere Movement. And I'm going to double click the sphere movement here. You can reuse much of the same code. And we're going to let's see later on when we're dealing with prefabs, objects, you can actually share the same set of code. And then over here, I'm going to declare vector3 position. I'll say position is equal to this dot transform dot position. And then I'm going to change position dot, I said x is what I was going to change, is equal to position dot x plus 0.1 f. That'll go a little bit faster because I'm making it 0.1 instead of 0.05. And then I'm going to drop that back. This dot transform dot position is equal to position dot position. So again, this declares structure, call it position, as vector3. And here I'm taking the current position, the x, y, z, and I'm saving it off in this variable. You can think of it as a variable. And then I'm changing just the x part of that variable by adding 0.1. And then I'm writing it back out to my game. So I'll click Attach to Unity. And again, if I did an Alt-Tab, it doesn't go. That means it's still transferring it. Still working. There it goes. Now if I play that, there's my ball going off the side there. And it very quickly went off the screen. Maybe I don't want that. If I come back to my code here and I'll stop the debugging with the red square, what I can do is I can check. I can say if, I don't want it there. I'm going to have it here. Here, the // is a comment. Check to see if it is too far to the positive. I want it to go to the positive to a certain distance, and then I want it to turn around and go the other direction. So I can check if position.x is greater than here's my ball. It's currently at 5.62. So let me change that to 10. Is greater than 10. I want to go back the other way. So question is how do I achieve that? Well, one way is up here under the declaring the sphere movement. You have another variable. I'll make it a float, I guess. And this will be called direction. And I'll have it equal to a positive 1 initially. And down here, when I'm adding this 0.1f, I'm going to multiply it times my direction. Well, think what I'm doing here. This is the number 1. When you take 0.1 times 1, that gives you 0.1. So not too exciting. And then it keeps adding 0.1. If I've gone too far and I want to change direction, then I say direction is equal to direction times negative 1. Well, let's think what that does then. So it's gone past 10. And so then I take my direction, which is 1 to begin with. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And then up here, when it multiplies 0.1 times direction, 0.1 times negative 1 gives you a negative 0.1. That causes the x value to decrease, become smaller. Okay, so, but I also want the other direction. If position.x is less than negative 10, direction is equal to direction times negative 1. Let's see if that works. Attached to Unity. Not every bit of code that I have this brilliant idea to implement works. Sometimes it takes me a long time to get the code to do what I want it to do. You can always tell if you enjoy being a programmer is if you enjoy that challenge. Is you're sitting there fiddling with it, trying to get it the way you want. Okay, so let me run this now. There's my ball going off. Now it's turning around, coming back. Should get over there somewhere, and it should turn around and come back. So this will forever keep rolling back and forth. Now I still have access to my cube. If I use my arrow keys here, where's the ball? Let's have it hit. There. You may have noticed it passed right through my cube, didn't it? This is where we'll be adding this in coming classes. This is where you put colliders in there. You know, how do you want it to handle it if you got a collider set up? Now you might look at these and say, well, yeah, you have a collider over here. You know, here's your sphere collider right here. Yeah, but there's a little bit more to it in terms of getting them to collide. I expect the cube even has a collider on it if I look. Let's see. Yeah, see how it has a collider, but a little bit more to it than just dropping the collider on. Is there any questions on the movement on that?
Essentially, all you did is make it like bounce off two.
Essentially, all you
right?
did is make it
Right,
like bounce
exactly.
off two invisible walls, right?
Okay, then no questions here.
Okay.
Okay, then no questions here.
Same here.
Okay. Now, what you can do
Same here.
on this is you don't have to actually program it with like an if statement, like you indicate. I could actually add walls on here. If I create 3D object and choose a cube. You know, if I threw it over here, you change my scale wherever it's at. There it is. so used to just keep wanting to do Blender stuff. This is where you can actually put the wall there. And you could still have your if statement, assuming your wall is in an appropriate place. See how my wall here says it's at negative 8.63? There's negative 8. So I'm guessing if that's negative 8, if I come back to my code, and I think negative 8 should be fine. If I come back to my code, I could come here and I could check these against 8. And it would probably appear like it hits the wall, although it might go a little bit beyond since I'm adding 0.1 or subtracting 0.1 over and over. Now this is programming my own collision. This isn't using the collider. So this isn't the best way to do it. I'm just following up on kind of what you indicated. There it goes. So let me run that. Went through the wall, didn't it? See, that's where I had to play with it a little bit. How you'd really do it, though, is using your colliders. And you check for a collision, and if a collision has occurred, that's where you can reverse the direction. Some of the very simplest things in a game is done by some very basic multiplying by -1, for example. First time I tried to program a pool game with like a ball bouncing off the side of the pool table. I was trying to use trig and being real fancy and all this and that. And then I realized I don't know if I can draw it or not. I'll eventually bring my tablet. I got a spare tablet at home. I'll bring it in so I can actually draw without a mouse. But if you got this here and you got your ball coming in, as this comes up and hits here, it's going to bounce off. Now, as this is bouncing off, your X is changing by the same increment. So that hasn't changed. Just a standard without any kind of special on that. So the X is changing no matter what. But what's happening is the Y is dependent upon which direction Y and Z is located at. But here Y is increasing. Maybe it's increasing by 1 each time through the game cycle. After you touch the side, your Y is decreasing by 1. And that's what's causing it to go back this way. But your X is still just going and increasing by a value of 1. They got whole books dedicated to artificial intelligence, some of these techniques, how to simulate. So there's a lot more to games than you'd think. The math behind there isn't really horrible. The trig, I was trying to figure, okay, what should my angle be here when it bounces off and so forth. And if you've taken geometry, which has been many years since I've had geometry, if that's, for example, 40 degrees, from geometry, if you bounce off, what should that be?
40 degrees.
40 degrees, yeah. So when you think about it, geez, that does just make a lot of sense. That you just have to change your direction, like what we just did. What I want you to do with the assignment on this is I want you to create a game, drop a train on there. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, and program in your character moving about. And don't go with arrow keys like I used. Use the standard. I I don't play games on my PC. I do it on a PlayStation. But what is it? ASW, something like that?
WASD.
Right. Go ahead and program those in.
WASD.
And and you can create your own object if you want. If you just want to drop a cube or a sphere on there, that's up to you. And just program the basic movements on that. And we'll keep building upon that and learn more about the programming techniques. And don't stress out. If this code over here seems as vague as can be, you'll get to a point where you do this bit of code right here so much in the class, it'll be second nature. Is there any questions on any of that?
Not from me. Not from me.
Well, I'll go ahead and create 2 drop boxes for that. Remember, we got our mini town and then the character movement. I'll go ahead and stop the